Would you say I'm crazy if I told you that the big magnitude 9 plus Megathrust earthquake plus a 100 feet tsunami, the big one, Cascadia fault, is not the worst case scenario for the West Coast? It's not? You would ask, what else? What could be worse? Hey guys, this is so bad you won't believe this. This is actually worse. This is like the two biggest tragedies ever combined and worse. So a new study has found this and it's absolutely insane. So imagine you own a townhome and you're stuck to your neighbor. And your neighbor burns down the house with a big explosion. What happens to your townhouse? Most likely, shizzy's hitting the fizzy, guys. And this is what this video is about. You won't believe it. I have to say the sentence. This is groundbreaking. Welcome on the Pulse with Silky Squat. Thanks for tuning in. This is crazy. I have just reported yesterday about the super share earthquakes that are comparable with a fighter jet breaking the sound barrier. A sonic boom where basically everything accelerates, and that had happened in Myanmar. That's why they were wondering why everything was so bad and the fault ruptured so long. So this is bad, and it's bad for California because the San Andreas fault can have a super share earthquake. So my yesterday video made it already worse. I'm sorry for everyone that's living in California. I love California. I went to university there in San Diego and in Santa Barbara. So this is really bad. But I'm living along the Cascadia subduction zone, the dangerous, the big one, guys. So I think some Californians are like, thankfully, we only have the San Andreas fault, right? We have the Cascadia fault that could produce a magnitude 9 megathrust earthquake with a tsunami that reaches the coast within 8 to 15 minutes. And that tsunami could be as high as 100 feet, 30 meters, or even higher. And even worse, when the earthquake happens, it's a subduction zone and it's stuck. The land will jump up and it will sink probably at least 6 feet. So if you're standing on the beach, you're dealing with liquefaction, everything sinking 6 feet, which makes the tsunami even more powerful. And scientists say this is the earthquake that will destroy the Pacific Northwest, that will rip open everything west of I-5. That's the highway that goes from California all the way through Oregon, Washington, into British Columbia, Canada. That will also be affected, Western Canada, from that Cascadia fault. The Cascadia fault runs along Vancouver Island. Victoria will be heavily affected. But here's the problem. If the San Andreas fault ruptures, super bad. If the San Andreas fault ruptures in a super share earthquake, absolutely disastrous. You have to watch the video. I explain what that is. It'll blow your mind. I promise this. It'll be in the end screen. But now, let's talk about two neighbors, San Andreas fault and Cascadia fault. And knowledge up to date was they can't trigger each other. The San Andreas fault can't trigger the big one, and the big one doesn't trigger the Cascadia fault. Well, so we thought, guys, think about the townhomes. A megathrust earthquake in the Pacific Northwest could trigger shaking along the entire West Coast. That's what a new study says. And when I first heard about this, okay, yeah, they might feel the shaking, right? No, not that easy. It's worse. A megaquake could trigger a large earthquake along California's San Andreas fault. Boom, there it is. I mean, imagine this, guys. The whole West Coast. We're talking San Andreas fault, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, the southern part of the San Andreas Fault is locked and loaded. Salton Sea, we're seeing earthquakes there. So the whole West Coast. So does that mean not even people from California can come to help the people on the West Coast once the big one has hit? Because it'll be an absolute disaster. It could take weeks or months until people could get there and get help. So now California as well. This would be the biggest disaster, guys, that North America has seen in our lifetimes and probably ever since people settled there. This 2 townhomes burning down at once, this would create an unprecedented catastrophe up and down the Pacific coast. This is what this new study has found. And why did they find this? What told them that this will be the case? They have looked at the past and they have found evidence. So this is not some crazy speculation. That's the bad part. In addition, it's real. And that it's getting worse, they just discovered this by coincidence. This is what you have to imagine. I mean, we can be lucky that they've made this mistake, because the researchers from the Oregon State University and other institutions wanted to do some drilling through the ocean floor to obtain sedimentary cores, because that way they could get a record of undersea activity that would go back thousands of years. And that would tell them what has happened in this area. But then they made a mistake. Can you believe this? They meant to collect cores only from the Cascadia zone, but they made a navigational mistake that took them south to the waters above Noyo Canyon. I mean, this is water. You can't really see where you are. If you make a navigational mistake, you're slightly off over the Noyo Canyon in the San Andreas Fault zone. And since they were already there, they said, you know what? Let's drill a core from the Noyo Canyon as well. And you have to understand, if we have seismic activity, earthquakes, other stuff happens, a landslide resulting from an earthquake, for example, leaves a distinct signature within a core. And these signatures, they're called turbidites. So they feature a layer of larger grains that are covered by a layer of finer grains. And when they took the core from the Noyo Canyon, the turbidites appeared in pairs, one on top of the other, which was unusual, because that indicates that there must have been 2 seismic events occurring almost simultaneously. How can that be? They thought. Then they drilled the cores in the Cascadia zone and they made the same results. They were like, how can this be possible? Then they used radiocarbon dating, and that showed that these turbidites were deposited at the same time in both locations. That's how the scientists describe it. A light bulb went on. We realized that the Noyo Channel was probably recording Cascadia earthquakes. And also they found that at a similar distance, Cascadia sites were recording San Andreas Fault earthquakes. So they have evidence of partial synchronization of both faults. So these cores of drilling, they suggest that seismic activity to the north on the Pacific coast could trigger a shift in the San Andreas Fault, and that would also unleash a series of earthquakes, but with resulting tsunamis that could cause unprecedented devastation all along the whole West Coast. And that's why the researchers say this is movie territory, because it's kind of hard to exaggerate what a magnitude 9+ earthquake would be like in the Pacific Northwest. And now the possibility that a San Andreas earthquake would follow shortly after, that's why movie territory. So in this study, they're saying that this fearsome Cascadia subduction zone is capable of producing earthquakes magnitude 9 or higher, and it basically ends or starts however you want to see it, in Northern California. And there is a junction anyways of several faults, but this is basically where the San Andreas Fault starts or ends, how you want to say it, but they're close to each other. The evidence is there that a big megathrust earthquake at the Cascadia Fault has triggered the San Andreas Fault in the past. Large earthquakes in San Francisco and elsewhere, all along the northern part of the San Andreas Fault. But we know the southern part is locked and loaded. So if that was to happen now, probably that rupture could then also unleash the southern part. And what's even scarier, there's not much time left in between. So they said in some cases it's possible that the big earthquakes that happened on the San Andreas Fault followed the first megathrust quake within minutes or hours, but some within minutes. No warning. So guys, really, I think the new science using AI with earthquake prediction tools and with satellite data monitoring every movement of these faults will be crucial for us in the future. Hopefully, there is enough time to develop better systems. But listen, guys, listen to this. Here's the evidence. For example, the researchers found evidence that the last magnitude 9 megathrust earthquake off the Cascadia subduction zone that happened in 1700. And by the way, researchers say that we're overdue. It happens every 300 to 350 years. We're overdue. That subduction zone earthquake was so large, it has caused a tsunami in Japan. But more important for the West Coast, it has triggered a major earthquake on the northern San Andreas Fault. I remember that at my time when I was living in California, I always thought, yeah, Northern California is probably the better part, that you don't have all these earthquake risks like LA, San Francisco. I guess I was really wrong. So the northern part of the San Andreas Fault, basically that fault extends from the Mendocino Junction, where several faults are meeting. That's offshore of Humboldt County. Absolute stunning area there. I loved being there. And yeah, there it meets the Cascadia Fault. So from the Mendocino Junction, where it meets the Cascadia Fault, to Hollister in Santa Clara County. This is the area that is most at risk. And they suggest that this earthquake of the San Andreas Fault could have been as large as 7.9, and now at the super shear. Horrible. Watch the video on the end screen. I have added that video again where you see the first time ever live on CCTV how the ground breaks and shifts from the Myanmar 7.7 earthquake. This is mind-blowing. It's in the end screen, as I said. So that earthquake, just as a comparison that might have been caused in 1700, is probably as large as the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which was devastating, wreaked havoc all over San Francisco with fires, bridges collapsing. Absolutely horrible. And this is not all. The authors of the study, they found evidence of 18 other large earthquakes on the Cascadia Fault that preceded the ones on the northern San Andreas Fault over the past 3,000 years. So this is important because this is a repeating pattern. It's not like, this was an oopsie that fault was triggered. No, it seems that this happens quite often. And We've seen earthquakes in that area, in the higher ranges in the last few weeks. I've been on location for you guys on the pulse. Off the coast of Oregon, off Bandon, we've seen several earthquakes in the magnitude 6 range, and we started to be worried. Is it the Cascadia fault? Is it the San Andreas fault? Well, it's a junction of other faults there, but we've learned in the past, at least if you watch my channel on a regular basis, that even faults that run along or vertical of other fault, of bigger faults, can trigger the big fault. That's the case for the San Andreas fault as well. The smaller faults that are rumbling on a regular basis can also trigger the big one. Because you have to imagine, even also the San Andreas fault, where it's sliding past each other, it's locked and loaded. And if there's rumbling, constant rumbling, that makes it loose. So some co-authors of this study have been studying these two faults, the two townhomes, for over 20 years. So they really are experts and they really know what they're saying. So this latest study has the strongest evidence so far that the earthquakes on the Cascadia fault preceded those on the San Andreas fault. And that is really, really scary, because that means we have two disasters that we're fearing on the West Coast together, and that is not good at all. Cascadia fault, Victoria, Vancouver Island, capital of BC, Vancouver, greater Vancouver area, more than 3 million people, cities along the coast from Bellingham, then we have Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, all these areas. Portland will be affected, and down through Oregon, Salem, Eugene, and down to Southern Oregon, and then California, Crescent City, Eureka. And then it goes, if it triggers the San Andreas fault, to San Francisco and even LA. The scientists say we're used to hearing the big one, the Cascadia fault earthquake, is the catastrophic, huge thing. Yeah, we're kind of used to that, although sometimes it surprises me that when I meet people in Canada, Vancouver, that live there, they don't even know about this. Kind of crazy. But yeah, we're the ones that are educated, and you guys, of course, the Silky on the Pulse with Silky Squat, you hear me talking about that all the time. So marine geologists of the Oregon State University said in a news release, yeah, we're used to hearing about the big one, but it turns out this is not our worst case scenario. And that is a powerful statement, because the big Megathrust earthquake, Cascadia fault, is like the biggest disaster that everyone is so afraid of. And being told that this is not the worst case scenario really sounds crazy. Interesting is that this geologist of the Oregon State University, he lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he said, should the big one happen, should the Cascadia fault go off, when he is home in Palo Alto, he would drive east immediately. Yeah, I absolutely, but if it only takes minutes, can you still drive? Will the road still be okay? We've seen it in all these earthquakes. The pavement, it's cracking, no chance to drive a car. So he says we could expect that an earthquake on one of the faults alone would draw down resources of the whole country trying to respond to it. But if they both went off together, then you've got potentially, and he says it, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, all in an emergency situation in a compressed time frame. This is insane. And I think he describes it really well, like emergency situation of all these major cities along the West Coast in this compressed time frame. That would really imagine that. So I don't even want to imagine this. This is absolutely crazy, but this is a reality that we're facing, guys, I have to say. And quakes on the Cascadia fault are caused when the Gorder plate is basically pushed underneath the North American plate. And if we look at the overall chances, the Cascadia subduction zone has a 37% chance of producing a large quake in the next half century, in the next 50 years. So, but the problem is people always hear 50 years. But not in 50 years, within 50 years, 37%. This is high, guys. This is a high chance because it could happen tomorrow. So scientists are saying that alone would cause devastation from the Pacific Northwest to Northern California and set off tsunamis that also could reach the Bay Area, not as fast as the other area that's closer to the epicenter, but also within hours, which would be devastating. So the frequency of these major quakes on the southern part of the Cascadia subduction zone, for example, as large as magnitude 8.5 or 9 plus, they happen on average every 220 years. The last one was in 1700. Now do the math. The frequency when we look at on the northern San Andreas Fault is an average of 200 years. Do you see the connection? So Cascadia Fault doesn't need to rupture all at once, by the way. Researchers said we can divide it in 3 sections, the southern part, the middle part, and the northern part in Canada and Washington. Same goes for the San Andreas Fault. It could rupture, right now they think it could rupture in the southern part, in the Salton Sea where it's locked and loaded. But you know, everything is possible. We could see a full rupture of both fault lines as well. So San Andreas Fault every 200 years, Cascadia Fault every 220 years. And that's just an estimate, right? They're very close together. So the scientists say that may be part of the story as well as to why there is such a strong correlation between earthquakes in Cascadia and the northern San Andreas Fault. So if we say one good takeaway from this is, only for one of the townhouses, is that the scientists have found evidence that earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault that happened first have not triggered the Cascadia Fault. There's no evidence for that. So it's good news for the people that live on the Cascadia Fault. Of course, it's still shitty news for people that live along the San Andreas Fault. And we know that one's overdue, right? They're expecting that to be triggered at any time. San Francisco's earthquake that happened in 1906 had an epicenter just offshore of the Golden Gate Bridge. And it's the only major earthquake on the northern San Andreas Fault in the past several millennia that was not preceded by a large quake of the Cascadia subduction zone. So should we worry now that the San Andreas Fault has done something without Cascadia? Maybe Cascadia overslept. Is this an indication that we're even more overdue with Cascadia? Well, it is hard to tell, guys, but I think this new finding is definitely crucial because so far we all thought, well, if we're in California while the Cascadia Fault ruptures, we're kind of safe, right? We need to get off the coast because there's a tsunami. But other than that, but now, if you hear the news earthquake at the Cascadia Fault, well, prepare if you're in California. Get whatever you plan to do. Everyone has their worst case scenario drill. Depends where you are, what building you're in. Expect something to happen. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So guys, there's another volcano that's about to erupt off the coast of Oregon. It's not that far from the Cascadia Fault zone. So many people think, oh, can this trigger the Cascadia Fault? Well, we hope not, and it doesn't look like, but this is a monstrosity of a volcano. Link is in the description. So there's the volcano and there's the supershare earthquake. You should subscribe to watch both. If you want to fill me up with coffee to keep me running and talk about all this talk nonstop, Link is in the description. I have a buymeacoffee.com/silky site. Thank you so much for supporting the channel there and for your supers, and to all my members that have clicked the join button and support the channel with that. I see you very, very soon. Stay safe, guys. Be prepared. Bye-bye.